Hello. Today's story is about a girl of breathtaking beauty named Manohara. At just 15 years old, she became the most beautiful princess in Malaysia. However, her life was far from a fairy tale. Instead, every night, she endured unimaginable pain, turning her life into a living nightmare. This dark and real-life story even came close to sparking an international dispute. Manohara's mother, Daisy, was Indonesian. She had once been married to a local man named Eddie, before remarrying an American named George Mans. On February 28, 1992, Daisy and George welcomed their daughter in Jakarta. This was Manohara. With an Indonesian mother and an American father, she held dual citizenship and carried mixed heritage. Even as a child, Manohara stood out with her refined and striking features, making her different from her peers. However, when Manohara was just 2 years old, her parents' marriage fell apart. Her father left, never to be heard from again. Her mother, Daisy, later remarried a German man named Rainer Pinot and had another daughter, Dewey. From then on, Manohara took on her stepfather's surname, Pinot. Due to her stepfather's work, Manohara's family moved frequently. They lived for 2 years in Hong Kong, 6 months in Romania, then moved through Austria, Switzerland, and England before finally settling in France. It wasn't until 2006, after the passing of Manohara's grandfather, that Daisy decided to take her daughter back to Indonesia. From an early age, Daisy recognized Manohara's extraordinary potential. She meticulously controlled her daughter's diet and invested heavily in the arts to cultivate her grace and demeanor. Daisy made sure Manohara attended high society events, allowing her to network with powerful figures. By the time she was 10, she had already blossomed into a stunning young girl, fluent in Indonesian, English, and French. Her striking appearance quickly propelled her into modeling, and she soon became a well-known face in Indonesia, gracing the covers of fashion magazines. At just 12, Harper's Bazaar ranked her among Indonesia's top 100 models. In December 2006, at the age of 14, Manohara received an invitation from Najib, then Malaysia's deputy prime minister, to attend a prestigious dinner in Kuala Lumpur. The event gathered high-ranking figures from the political and business elite. This was a defining moment in her modeling career, but it also marked the turning point that would change her life forever. At the event, the third Prince of Kelantan, Faris, was immediately captivated by Manohara's ethereal beauty. He fell for her at first sight, becoming infatuated in an instant. Malaysia consists of 9 states, with Kelantan being one of the hereditary monarchies. The sultans of these states take turns serving as the King of Malaysia in 5-year terms. Faris was the third son of the 28th Sultan of Kelantan. At that time, he was already 28 years old, twice Manohara's age. Far from the dashing prince of fairy tales, Faris had a rough and unrefined appearance, thinning hair, and an often greasy complexion. At the dinner, he carried himself with an air of elegance, but he was well known for his hedonistic lifestyle. His reputation as a spoiled playboy, lazy, reckless, and addicted to women, was widely acknowledged. Rumors swirled that he had been involved with hundreds, if not thousands, of women. To Manohara, however, none of this mattered. She had no particular impression of him, just that he was reserved and polite. The only thing that caught her attention was that he courteously helped her mother carry her handbag, which struck her as gentlemanly. They exchanged phone numbers, but Manohara gave him her mother's contact instead. To her, this was nothing more than a casual acquaintance. At most, if the prince visited Indonesia, he might call her for dinner with friends. Likewise, if she were in Malaysia, they might meet in a similar manner. But Faris saw things differently. He was serious, and this was no mere flirtation. The very next day after the banquet, he sought Manohara at her hotel and boldly declared his intention to marry her, insisting that she had no way to refuse. He even claimed that wedding invitations had already been sent and that the venue was prepared. If she rejected him, it would put the royal family in a difficult position. Faced with this coercion, Manohara firmly refused. In an attempt to persuade her, Faris promised that once they were married, she could return to Indonesia and continue her life as before. But no matter what he said, she would not agree. After repeated rejections, Ferris resorted to force. In the dead of night, he broke into her room and violated her. Traumatized, Manohara immediately told her mother that she wanted to go to the police. Shockingly, her mother stopped her. Daisy warned her that they were in Malaysia and suing a prince was nearly impossible. Worse, if they pressed charges, they might face serious retaliation from the royal family. Rather than fight back, Daisy urged Manohara to marry him. At that moment, Manohara had no idea that she was about to be pushed into an abyss, and the one pushing her was her own mother. It turned out that Ferris had investigated Daisy and discovered that she was drowning in debt. Holding this as leverage, he paid off all of her debts in exchange for Manohara. However, at just 16 years old, Manohara was still underage according to Malaysian law and lacked the necessary documents from the Indonesian embassy. But for someone like Ferris, this was no obstacle. Through a series of special arrangements, their wedding was grandly held on August 26th. In her innocence and lack of understanding, 16-year-old Manohara officially became a Malaysian princess. Her wedding sent shockwaves through the public, and she was quickly hailed as the most beautiful princess in Malaysia. But the dream she once imagined shattered immediately after the ceremony. Manohara had believed that she could continue her modeling career even as a princess. Instead, she found herself completely stripped of her freedom. On their wedding night, Ferris cast aside his gentlemanly facade. He screamed at her, calling her a gold digger and claiming that women like her were a dime a dozen. He degraded her, saying she was unworthy of being a princess and should sleep on the floor instead. From that moment on, Manohara's life turned into a true nightmare. During the day, she was forced to smile, appearing at public events alongside her husband, portraying the image of a happy princess. But behind closed doors, she faced relentless psychological and physical torment. Ferris treated her with no respect, constantly insulting her, comparing her to a luxury car, flashy but ultimately replaceable. He even declared that he could discard her at any time. The most horrifying part was that Ferris forced doctors to inject her with an unknown substance. After being injected, she would lose all ability to move or speak, but remained fully conscious. She could see, hear, and feel everything, but could not fight back or call for help. Through her paralyzed body, she witnessed the sadistic pleasure in Ferris's eyes. He took his time, savoring her suffering, as though prolonging her agony was what truly thrilled him. Those days made Manohara feel like she was worth less than an animal. She had no one to turn to for help. Everyone in the royal family knew what she was going through, but not a single person cared enough to step in. To them, as a wife, Manohara's only duty was to please her husband and bear his children. She had no right to resist. Living in constant fear, she could only sleep at 4 a.m., afraid of being drugged or injected with something against her will. To maintain the illusion of a happy royal couple, Ferris frequently injected Manohara with hormones, causing her to gain 15 kilograms in just 2 months. His goal was to make the public believe she was living a blissful married life. Despite the abuse, Manohara tried to gather evidence. She hid her phone under the sink and secretly took pictures of her injuries. That very phone would later become the key to her escape. In February 2009, she attempted to flee to Singapore and return to Indonesia. Ferris desperately tried to stop her but failed. To win her back, he bought her an expensive car for her birthday and invited her family on a pilgrimage to Mecca. However, once the trip ended on February 26th, Ferris forcibly took Manohara away from Saudi Arabia, abandoning her mother and younger sister at the Mecca airport. After the incident, Manohara's mother, Daisy, publicly declared that her daughter had been kidnapped with the help of the royal family and urged the Indonesian government to intervene. By the end of April 2009, Daisy decided to hold a press conference, revealing the horrifying truth about Ferris's abuse. She also accused the Malaysian government of blocking her entry when she tried to visit her daughter. Some members of the royal family, sympathetic to Manohara, confirmed that Ferris did not treat her like a wife, but instead humiliated and tortured her. As the news spread, the Indonesian public was outraged. Protests erupted, demanding Manohara's return. Demonstrations even turned violent outside the Malaysian embassy in Jakarta. Despite this, both governments maintained that it was a private marital matter and refused to intervene. Finally, in May 2009, Manohara found her chance to escape. When Faris's father was hospitalized in Singapore for a heart condition, the royal family traveled there on May 31st with Manohara in tow. Upon receiving a secret message from her daughter, Daisy and Manohara's sister immediately flew to Singapore and rushed to her hotel. At the time, Faris was surrounded by 4 or 5 bodyguards. When he saw Daisy and her younger daughter, his expression darkened. He quickly ordered security to keep a close watch on Manohara. When she tried to leave the hotel, the guards blocked her on the 3rd floor. A passerby, an Indonesian staying at the hotel, approached Daisy and whispered that they had seen Manohara upstairs, but that she wasn't allowed to leave. Just then, the hotel's emergency alarm blared. Daisy and Manohara's sister sprinted to the 3rd floor, where they found her sobbing, struggling against the bodyguards in the elevator. She clutched the emergency button, and when she saw her mother, she screamed, "Mom, don't ever let them take me away again." Singaporean police and the U.S. Embassy quickly got involved. Negotiations lasted from 9 p.m. until 4 a.m. At first, Faris refused to let Manohara go, but his lawyer warned that if he continued to hold her against her will, he could face legal consequences. Only then did he reluctantly agree to release her. With the assistance of the U.S. Embassy, Manohara, her mother, and her sister made it to Changi Airport and safely flew back to Indonesia. Upon arriving in Jakarta, Manohara held a press conference, confirming everything her mother had said. She stated that during her time in the Malaysian royal family, she suffered continuous physical and emotional abuse. She also revealed that the royal family was fully aware of what was happening, but chose to remain silent. After enduring unimaginable pain, she declared that she would never return to Malaysia again. Manohara then underwent medical and psychological examinations. She announced that she would submit the reports to her lawyer to begin divorce proceedings against Faris. On June 10, 2009, she handed over 16 photos to Indonesian lawmaker Roy Suryo. Forensic experts analyzed 10 of the clearest images, which showed bruises, burns, cuts, and injection marks all over her body, on her chest, back, neck, and thighs. Some marks indicated that she had been burned by unknown chemical injections. However, in an unexpected twist, Faris was the first to take legal action. He sued Manohara for defamation against the Kelantan royal family and demanded $10.5 million, ringgit around $3 million in damages for reputational harm. Additionally, he ordered her mother to repay the debt he had previously cleared for her. Faris vowed to use the law to restore his honor. Daisy, Manohara's mother, was no stranger to playing the game of power. She understood the immense influence of the Malaysian royal family and knew exactly how she had willingly married off her daughter. Seeing the situation escalate, she quickly backed down and took on the role of a mediator. She advised her daughter to drop the lawsuit. However, Daisy made it clear that they were prepared to face any consequences for defying the court's ruling. This included forfeiting any rights Manohara might have had to benefits from the Kelantan royal family. They also had no intention of repaying the debt Faris demanded. In a surprising twist, Manohara's 2 fathers took opposite sides in the matter. Daisy revealed to the Indonesian press that Manohara's stepfather, who lived in Jakarta, fully supported her. Meanwhile, sources claimed that her biological father, George Mans, sided with Faris Mans, who had never even met Faris, wrote him a letter expressing his belief that the prince could take good care of his daughter and free her from her mother's influence. He even suggested he would seek U.S. State Department intervention, citing Manohara's American citizenship, to bring her back from Indonesia. Included in the letter were copies of Manohara's birth certificate and her first U.S. passport, clear, proof of his deep resentment toward Daisy. He recounted how, when Manohara was just 2 years old, his ex-wife took her away, leaving him in despair and eventually leading him down a path of alcoholism. Mans accused Daisy of being a perpetual liar, willing to do anything for money, and having a history of seducing men for personal gain. He also mentioned a bizarre discovery. During a dental checkup, he saw an X-ray that revealed a tiny metal implant in Daisy's chin. He claimed it was a traditional Indonesian charm inserted by shamans, believed to enhance beauty and attraction. As Manohara's case gained international attention, the media uncovered darker aspects of her mother's and stepfather's past. Before moving to France, Daisy had taken in a 14-year-old girl named Saliha from a small town in South Sulawesi. The girl was a distant relative, and Daisy had promised to send her abroad for education. But instead of fulfilling that promise, Saliha was turned into a domestic servant for Daisy's family for a decade. In April 2007, at the age of 25, she filed a police complaint in France, accusing Daisy and her husband of abuse, mistreatment, and coercion. Saliha testified that at first, Daisy treated her kindly, but things changed when her husband, Rainer Pinot, began showing an inappropriate interest in her. When she turned to Daisy for help, not only did she refuse to intervene, but she allegedly joined in the abuse. She also described Daisy as a manipulative woman who frequently borrowed money without repaying it. Eventually, Daisy and her husband were convicted in France. Rainer Pinot received a 4-month prison sentence, while Daisy was sentenced to 18 months. However, Daisy fled to Indonesia. Since there was no extradition treaty between the two countries, she never served her sentence. To this day, Daisy remains on France's wanted list. Furious at the accusations, Daisy denied everything. She claimed that Saliha's story was nothing but lies. According to her, she never treated Saliha as a servant, but instead took her on trips to many countries. She insisted that she had planned to enroll Saliha in school, but the girl refused to attend. Daisy also revealed a shocking detail. When she returned to France in March 2007 after 6 months in Indonesia, she caught her husband and Saliha in an intimate situation. She was devastated, as she had always considered the girl her own daughter. Saliha, overwhelmed with shame and guilt, left the house soon after. Before leaving, she cut her hair short and wrote a letter apologizing to Daisy, asking her not to look for her. In the letter, she even requested that her family be told she had passed away. But what Daisy didn't expect was that just a month later, in April 2007, she would receive a court summons from the local tribunal in Grasse, France. Despite her mother's notorious past, Manohara refused to let it define her. After escaping the Malaysian royal family, she took time to heal, but eventually returned to modeling. She didn't stop there. She ventured into acting and quickly regained her public image. Beyond the entertainment industry, she founded her own publishing house, actively engaged in humanitarian efforts, and became a passionate advocate for animal rights. She even ran for parliament, campaigning for environmental protection policies. In 2020, Manohara publicly converted to Christianity. In a predominantly Muslim country like Indonesia, this decision sparked widespread attention and made her the center of media discussions once again. However, she remained steadfast in her choice, vowing to continue fighting for women's rights and helping others who had suffered as she did. Manohara's life played out like a real-life fairy tale, but not the kind where the princess finds happiness with a prince. Instead, she proved that leaving the prince behind, through her own strength, she could still build a vibrant and fulfilling life. Reflecting on her painful past, she spoke with unwavering resilience. "I believe everything happens for a reason. What I went through made me who I am today."